And I thought I was going to do good. I had a good job and stuff like that. But, I relapsed, started using meth again, started carrying a gun again, started selling a lot of drugs. And then sure enough, the cops surrounded me one day and another high-speed chase, a bunch of drugs. And
Live from Orange County, it's Chris Curtis.
how you
How are
doing?
you, bro?
I'm good, dude. I'm good. Very blessed.
It, I'm glad you started it off that way because I'm gonna keep going down that road. How can you tell me right now that you're blessed after 2.5 decades in prison?
Well, the everything I've been through in my life, obviously there was somebody looking out for me. I didn't realize it for all these years, until I really got into understanding the Bible and understanding that, obviously had some angels watching over me, and at one point when I got my life sentence in 2022, at that point, I was never getting out of prison. That was it. In the state of California, when you got 28 to life, 7 to life, that was it. You were never getting out because they were just denying everybody when you went to the board of prison terms. And I just continued to live my life in prison. For years, I thought I was never getting out, and then in 2015, I ended up in ADSEG for drugs, and I got into some trouble. And I woke up in the hole. It was my daughter's birthday, and I told myself, like, I just can't do this anymore. And I prayed to God, and I prayed to I asking, hey, just help me. And I made a commitment to God and to myself that the next prison I went to, that I was going to get involved in all these self-help groups, and I was going to change. Even though I was never getting out of prison, I didn't want to die in prison being a scumbag. And from there on, you know, everything changed. And then some laws changed in the state of California. And I ended up going to the board of prison terms and being released in 2022.
So,
If that's not blessed, and I can't even go a step further. Not only that, I get out of prison, I go to LA, to Boyle Heights, a gang infested area, to do my transitional housing unit out there.
yep.
And from day one, dude, I prayed and I moved forward. I stopped blaming all my problems on everybody else and took responsibility for my life. And I haven't looked back. 3 months later, I was working as an electrician. A year later, I bought a brand new truck. Getting married in May to a beautiful woman, at a very nice place in Temecula, a winery. That's happening in a couple of months, dude. And I'm blessed. There's no other thing you can say. What can you say? It's all God, bro. That's the way I look at it. Anybody else will say, whatever. I know that my actions, of course, me being responsible and me, taking care of business, but everything I've been through in my life, all the times that, I've been in situations that could have taken my life, I've always been able to get out of those situations. I mean, it wasn't always pretty for other people, but I made it. And obviously God has a plan for me. And I'm just very blessed to be out here and doing what I'm doing now.
Golly, bro. I love it. Man, I love it. All right, let's rewind. So you were part of the three strike crew in California.
Yes, sir.
Explain
Yeah.
to the viewers, what's the three strike crew in California?
Okay. I want to say in 1994, they passed a law stating that if you have 3 violent felonies, that you're considered a career criminal and you're going to get 25 to life, no less.
America. We live in fear, and it's not Beirut, and it's not Mogadishu.
But the murder of a California child by a man with a 20-year criminal history was a tipping point, and a wave of anger swept the country.
How could this maggot have slid through the system this many times without somebody saying, wait a minute, pal.
Maybe more, but at least 25 to life. They took that law, and anytime a lawyer gets a hold of something, they always spin it to how they want it to work. And they just started striking hundreds and thousands of people out for pizza, for just crimes that didn't really deserve that punishment. And I deserved it. I'm not gonna lie. Like, prison saved my life, but a lot of people, they didn't deserve it, but they got it. But California continued just to fill the prisons up with lifers.
Yeah.
And that happened in 1994. So in 1995, I got 2 counts of aggravated assault with a firearm and got 2 strikes for that case. I only got 6 years because it was more of a self-defense thing. There were a lot of witnesses said that these guys started it, and I just, ended up on the better end of the deal. And but I got 2 strikes for that case. So when I went to prison for 6 years, anything else I do now from here on out is a life sentence. No matter any felony, I'm done. And of course, I got out in 2002, and I thought I was going to do good. I had a good job and stuff like that, but I relapsed, started using meth again, started carrying a gun again, started selling a lot of drugs, and then sure enough, the cops surrounded me one day, and another high-speed chase, a bunch of drugs, and what it essentially happened is I ended up with 28 to life in 2002 in October.
Good
and
grief.
Yeah. And
did you fight that case? Did you fight that case, or
I
did you?
didn't fight it because, so in California, they got this law called the Romero Act. And what it states is that if you have 2 strikes, they could strike a strike on your 3rd strike. They could strike a strike and essentially give you 10 years.
Yeah.
If you plead guilty, and if you try to go to the route. So what I did was I pled guilty to 107 years to life, because that's what they wanted to give me, 107 years to life for my crimes. I pled guilty to that to try to get the Romero Act, because there was no way of me beating the case. I got caught with a gun, a payo sheet, a bunch of money, a high-speed chase, and a bunch of meth weighed up separately in ounces, all that. There was no way you could beat that. They were following me. I was on a parolee at large. There was no way I could beat that. So my only chance was to plead guilty and get the Romero Act. But with my history, they denied that. But since that, I didn't take them through all the trial and spend all the money, they gave me 28 to life. And yeah.
How old were you?
30.
Wow, and they gave you 28 to life.
Yeah.
Holy cow. What was that day like? You remember hearing that sentence?
That whole 8 months was pretty disturbing for me. I kind of went through I had a lot of things going through my mind at that time. As soon as I got in trouble, I wasn't really like tripping on it as much. But then over the months in jail, I started realizing, like, dude, I messed up, man. Like, this is it. And I knew that if I got out, if I got in trouble again, there was a life sentence.
Yeah.
But once you start doing drugs and you're young like that, you don't think of the consequences. You don't think of the consequences when you're using meth. I don't. Like, when I start using meth, I know it my mind just goes right back into the street mode. And I didn't care. I knew I was going to end up in prison. I knew that was coming. But then after it happens to you and you're sitting in the county jail and you're just like, what did I do, man? And yeah, it was terrible, man. It was terrible.
Man. So after they give you that 28 to life in the courtroom or televised, however they gave it to you, do you still sit in county, or did they take you directly to CDCR?
I stayed in county for about a month, and then they sent me to Chino.
Okay.
And then at Chino State Prison, I did my, my reception.
Yep.
And the reason they sent me to Chino was because when I first got in trouble, they sent me to Chino to do my violation and told me, look, we're going to send you to Chino because I had to do your violation because I was on parole. But once that's done, we're going to bring you back to court and we're going to strike you out. But they brought me back to court 2 months later.
Oh boy.
So with that being said, when they send you to Chino, they send you right back to Chino. Whenever that, you go to court and you get finished, they send you back to Chino. So they sent me to Chino. I stayed there for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. And then they sent me to Salinas Valley State Prison.
Salinas is violent.
Yeah, it has its moments,
Definitely.
It has its moments.
Yeah. What was that like for you? How long did you spend on that yard?
I was there for about 4 years.
Okay.
And then from there, I went to Kern Valley State Prison.
Oh yeah, I visited Kern level 4 yard.
Well, it's all 180 yards.
180.
It's all 180.
Yeah, man, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I literally some guys that I totally look up to, I met on Kern, Jason and his brother. But yeah, the level 4, 180 yards. When I explain that to some people, they don't really grasp what that means. So since you lived on a level 4, 180, explain, what does that mean?
So 180 yards are considered the most violent yards in the state of California. I'm not saying any other of the level 4 yards are not, but the 180 yards are designed for people who get out of the shoe where there could be total control over the yards because they're violent. The day rooms are set up, to where there's only so many people in the day room, so many people in the yard. There's a brick wall going down the middle of the yard that separates the lower yard from the upper yard. And essentially it's just a pit of hell, really, sometimes. That's the only way I could, I'm not saying all the time, but it's just violent. All the people there are violent.
Yeah.
They're either coming out of the shoe, they're coming from another prison. I'm gonna say this: I like the big cells, but that's about it, But I'm not saying that. It's just the 180 yards are the worst yards.
Yeah,
There's
tough yards.
Yeah.
I had a conversation one time with a deputy warden on a 180 yard, and he was just confused. He said, "Why do you keep trying to bring your program here? Your literacy. Why do you keep pushing it?" And I said, "Well, these guys can either wake up every day and try to figure out how to start a business, or they can wake up every day and try to figure out how to stab you."
Yeah, exactly.
It's very, very interesting on those yards. I I found those yards to sometimes be the most humbling for me to go on to, because a lot of those guys were never going home.
Yeah. Yeah. And they were cool with that. That's the crazy part, that they were okay with that, whether you believe them or not. But there's some people on those yards that are like, I'm never going home. I don't want to go home. And I'm just going to be violent for the rest of my life. And that's the kind of people you're dealing with. Not everybody, but there's dudes on those yards that are serious, man.
Yeah.
They don't care about taking your life 1 second. And they'll go to the whole smiling the whole way there. Like, look what I did, and that's the kind of people you're dealing with, And if you really think about it, that's kind of crazy, huh? We walked around people like that for years, dude. And a lot of those people were good friends of ours. They were actually good dudes. They were actually like loyal people.
Yeah.
But they were killers, man. And there's no other way to say it,
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. It's so true. I honestly, I've sat across from so many of them over the years, I mean, 2 weeks ago I was in, and the gentleman that I was across from, he'll your point, he's life without, period, end of story. And like one of the most calm dudes, I was in a room of 200, but he was probably the most calm, the most gracious, the most respectful guy in the room. Like,
yeah.
And it was funny. It's not funny. Haha. It's only funny because you and I have been there, but
Yeah.
there was a cat in the back of the room, and, he was still a keyboard warrior. He was going home in 12 months, 18 months. And all he wanted to do was tell everybody how he was going to get money, get money, get money.
Yeah.
And I thought, bro, you're going to be back here so fast if you don't take at least a little bit of what these other guys are trying to give to you in terms of game in here.
Yeah.
Going outside to the real world, screaming at the world how tough you are, you're going to find out real quick. They're just going to lock you back up.
Yeah. I used to say that, a lot, like, dudes are already back in prison before they even get out, you know? Where
Mm.
they're talking, they're already back in prison before they even get out. You know, they're already talking about what they're going to do. And, you know, and I've seen dudes come back and forth a lot of times over, you know, my time in prison, like 3 or 4 times. One guy I remember, um, you know, and I want to touch on something that you said when, you know, how we laughed about the killing or whatever. But I did an interview with a correctional officer from High Desert a while back ago, and he said something that made sense. He goes, "We laugh at it because if we don't laugh at it, you know, we'll go crazy. Like it's a defense mechanism that the way we talk about stuff, we have to laugh it off because if you don't, you know, it will mess you up. You know, that's how we deal with everything in prison. We kind of just move on. You know, yeah,
And that became such a normal thing, right? Like just the day to day. It's hard to explain that to people. Like I was in the I was in the airport yesterday and this girl, she wasn't 25 years old and she had this PTSD dog with her.
yeah,
And like when I asked her, like, tell me the story about that, there really was no story. It was just a big lie.
yeah,
So I was explaining this to my 13-year-old son, like, what is PTSD? And I said, a lot of people, you know, who have experienced some really traumatic, whether it's like war or prison, and, you know, you get some of this post-traumatic stress, and you lived it for way longer than I did. And waking up every day in that environment, waking up to that smell,
yeah,
waking up to the same sounds, like, I don't know about you, but one of the things that I still struggle with is getting a good full nights of restful sleep.
dude, yeah, dude. It's crazy because for like a long time when I first got out, I slept great in prison, dude.
Mhm.
But when I got out, some nights I'd only get an hour of sleep. And I think what it is that, you know, you get set in that mode where you go to sleep, you wake up, get ready, the door's open. It's just the same thing over and over again. The door's shut, you watch TV. When you're in a cell, it's the same thing. The door's shut at night, you watch TV, you go to sleep, you get up early, make coffee, get ready, go out the door.
Yeah.
But now you can get up and the whole world's out there for us. So our mind, we wake up and then we're like, wow, you know, on the phone or out the door, we could do whatever we want, you know. And I think that plays a major role in it. I'm starting to sleep a little bit better now, but you know, I totally get what you're talking about on the sleep issue. There were some times where I wasn't sleeping at all, dude, like maybe an hour a night.
Yeah.
There was times when I thought I didn't deserve to be out, you know.
Really? Walk me through that. Explain that.
I can't really talk about why, but I'll just tell you that I'm lucky to be out, you
Yeah.
know. And there were times, man, after the first year that I got out, I'm actually in the first, I don't know, first 8 months where I was like, dude, you know, I don't deserve to be out, you know. Like there's other people in there that are way more rehabilitated than me that are never getting out, you know. They got life without or whatever. But there's just some things that happened over the years that you know that I'm that's one of the major reasons why every day I walk out my front door like, you know, I went to my bachelor party in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago, and they're like, what do you want to do? I go, well, you know, for me, walking out my front door is fun to me. I don't care what we do, you know, because I was in prison for essentially a life sentence, and now here I am. I'm cool with just sitting right here on Fremont Avenue and just watching all the people walk by. I mean, I'm happy. What do you guys want to do? Because whatever, going to work's fun for me. You know, like you know what I'm saying, right? It's like,
I do, but it's that what you're saying is that it's the depth of perspective that
yeah,
you have now, right? Like
yeah,
if
yeah,
I
dude.
go ahead.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, and I see it in the workforce. I'm an electrician, so there's, you know, they got people there that have never been through what we've been through. They're not, they've never had everything taken from them, so they don't understand the gratitude that we have just for being able to be out here to work in the workforce, to be out, to be free, to be working, to have a good job, to drive a nice truck or a car or whatever, dude. For me, it's just like every day is a blessing, you know. And I just I just haven't stopped since I got out, you know.
Let's talk
You know,
about you being
I'm
out.
very
Let's talk about you being out. One of the questions that I always get from guys on the inside, I stood next to one last weekend, and the anxiety that they have because they haven't been out in society for so long. Did you go through any of that anxiety? And if you did, how did you deal with it day one, day two, day three? What's your advice to these guys and gals?
well for me, you know. Also, you'll know when I say what I'm going to say, you'll understand it. Some people go to prison and they're miserable. They can't adapt to whatever it is. You know, they got all this time, they can't adapt to it. They just seclude themselves. They don't work out. For me, I guess I was able to adapt to my situation, and I was able to be happy for the most part. I'm not going to say I didn't hard time because I did, but when I got out, I had a plan. I went to school in prison to be an electrician, and I knew when I got out that's exactly what I was going to do. I had parole plans. I set my plans. I'm not going to get into any serious relationships until I get my life together, because toxic relationships and drug abuse is the number one reason why people end up going back to prison. Toxic relationships will ruin your life. So my parole plans were not to get into any serious relationships for the first year until I get my life together, until I have all my own stuff that I got by myself, and to become an electrician, get insurance, get my life together, you know, make sure that I'm totally stable before I move forward with anything else. And I followed that. And I did exactly what I said I was going to do. And I think that's very important for people that are getting out, that they make their parole plans and make sure they stick to them. You know, it's not easy. I'm not saying not to go out and have fun with girls and do all that, but I'm saying that you need to work on yourself and make sure that you get everything yourself, because uh, you'll feel better about yourself, for one, and for two, once you're stable, you could do whatever you want, you know. And that's the advice I could give. I knew what I was going to do. The only thing I was stressed out about was going to a transitional housing unit. Where's it going to be at? Of course, they sent me to LA. They sent me to ARC, which actually was great. It was in a bad neighborhood, but it was a brand new building, and it was great, dude. Uh, you know, I didn't go walking around the streets out there, of course. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you know, it was a great place to be. You know, they gave me a job picking up trash for like the first couple months at it's called CEO. And so I did that, and I was just waiting, you know, to get an electrical job, and I did. So not even 3 months later, I was an electrician. And I knew what I was going to do. You know, I think that it's a little stressful if you don't have a plan, and if you don't have education, and if you don't know what you're going to do. But I'll just give you anybody advice that's in prison. You got time right now to figure it out, you best figure it out. You know, because there's so many. Another thing too, for people that are getting out of prison, there's so many programs out there for lifers who are getting out of prison. For example, if you go to ARC, which is the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, have you heard of it?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so if you go to that transitional housing unit, there's many other avenues there. You know, you go to CEO, you work, you pick up trash, and then there's another place. It's called the Job Center of America. If you get your counselor at, you know, CEO to send you over there, you know, they'll give you $200 for clothes. They'll pay for your bus pass. If you got a car, they'll give you gas twice a month. But the biggest thing, and then nobody takes advantage of it, because nobody takes advantage. They will send you to school for free, and not only send you to school, they'll pay you to go to school and pay for it all. Whether you want to be a truck driver, electrician, whatever you want to be, they'll pay for it. You know, and they actually wrote an article about me, because they said, you know what, we're writing an article about you. You're like the star of the program. I go like, what do you mean? You're the only one that pretty much comes in here and takes advantage of this stuff. But that's what I'm saying. There's so many organizations out there that are set up to help you. My car got towed once. I went to a doctor's appointment and my car got towed. I told them they paid for the towing fee. And I'll even go a step further. Once I got the electrical job, because I told them I'm getting an electrical job, whatever. Once I got that job, I told them I'm getting this job. Well, once you get the job, give us a note from your employer and we'll give you $2,000 to buy all your tools. I'm like,
Whoa.
what? I'm like, wait a minute. Like, I didn't believe it really at first. I'm like, yeah, there's got to be something to it. Sure enough, dude. Once I bought them that thing, they gave me $2,000. I got on Amazon and ordered $2,000 worth of electrical tools.
Wow.
So, and the programs are out there and nobody takes advantage of it. So, I just would recommend to anybody that is a lifer that's getting out of prison, man, there's programs out there that will really help you out. You might have to, and they didn't ask me to go to no groups, or they just helped me out. And that's called Job Center of America. And they actually wrote a story, said I was the star of the program. I was pretty much the only guy in the program, but hey, but that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So when these lifers are getting out of prison, I'm very critical on this. I don't want to hear somebody say, I can't get a job, or this or that. Dude, you can do whatever you want. If I could do it, you just got to do it. You got to quit, being a victim of your past. But the world is ours, dude. We have more, we're more grateful to be out here than anybody. And you got to be willing to put the work in. And I've just been very lucky. I took advantage of the programs that were given to me when I got out, and dude, it's great.
I love it, bro. I love the success story. On the next topic of employment, because everybody's so curious, right? Like, I was in front of a guy the other day and he's so worried about checking the box that he's a felon.
That don't matter, dude, anymore.
Speak on it. Go.
Dude, that does not matter anymore. You're going to find places where that might matter, but that doesn't matter anymore. Because like, I'll give you an example. At my company, once I told them told them my story, they were just like, what? And then they wanted a book, and now they let me take off. They let me take off time to go to schools and speak to at-risk youth. Anytime I got to go to the school to speak to, the youth. Yeah, no problem. And now when they hire people at the company, they tell people when they're hiring them, yeah, we got guys here that, had life in prison and now they're out helping the community. And in the construction field, that's everybody's, pretty much an ex-felon. That doesn't matter. What matters is your work ethic. It doesn't matter, where you come from. You go there and bust your ass and be a good person, bro, you're going to be fine. I'm not saying every place is like that, but that's just a cop out. It really is, especially in California, right now it's built for people, for felons, there's jobs everywhere.
Jobs everywhere. And you mentioned one thing, it's the work ethic. I don't know if you were always this way, or if your sobriety pushed you this way, or if because you had a plan, but it seems to me like you are like just naturally driven.
Well, one of my friends told me, like, you've always been like this. Even on the streets when I was selling drugs, I was always just a go-getter, I guess you could say. And but I think I get my work ethic from my dad. That's about the only thing I got from my dad. But I think that, I'm hyperactive. That helps, with, being able to do a lot of things and work hard. But I just, if you want something, you got to work hard for it.
The work ethic doesn't exist out here. That's what I'm seeing. That's what I try to tell these guys.
It doesn't, dude. I see these, and I'm guilty of it too sometimes, but for the most part, I'm a pretty good worker, and sometimes I work 7 days a week. I do side jobs every weekend. I mean, the way the economy is, the way they take all our money through taxes, you have to.
Yeah.
I make good money, dude. And if it wasn't for side jobs, I would, I'd be broke.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. It's going to get better. with what's going on. It's going to get a little bit better, but you know, it's tough out here when you got to pay $1,500 for rent, um, and then a truck payment, and then they just take a lot of your money. And the more money you make, the more money they take.
You got it. You
It's
got it.
crazy. It's
Yep.
crazy, man. And remember, come to find out, I don't want to get all into that, but now we're finding out that all our money is just going to nonsense.
Nonsense.
And I feel sorry for the people that have been out here all these years getting taxed, and then come to find out it's just a big old joke.
Yeah.
But
Not going where it should, that's for sure.
yeah, definitely. But yeah.
What do you take from like the work that you're doing now? Because explain to the people how, like, you obviously did a lot of self-reflection on the inside.
Yeah.
You talked about now doing the work with the at-risk youth. Like, let's go down that path. Because you were once that child, right? You were once an at-risk youth.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad started making cocaine when I was 13 years old. So from pretty much that point forward, I was a mess.
Was he a drug dealer or a drug addict or both?
He was a drug dealer and a drug addict, but he worked every day. See, that's what I'm saying. My dad went to work every day. My dad was a brick mason, so he was a hard worker. And the more I realized, the more that I understand that I actually got my work ethic from my dad because he was a good worker.
Okay.
I also got my drug addiction from my dad, but I could say that my dad worked, but I was just a mess. I was on drugs. I didn't want to do schoolwork. I used my ADHD as I can't do this, I can't do that. And I just ruined my life, dude. And eventually ended up with a life sentence, And the only thing that I could say about that is that I blamed my dad for my life for years.
Mm.
And I told myself that I can't do this, I can't do that. But then I go to prison, get a life sentence, I get an AA degree, electrical vocation, all this schoolwork and stuff I said I couldn't do when I was a kid. I did it all and more because I wanted to, because I stopped being a victim of my past and I put the work in and did it. And it wasn't easy. I'm not saying I'm better than anybody or anything because it's tough for me to learn. And a lot of the stuff I learned, I just forgot because this is the way my mind works, unless I'm constantly doing it, I forget it, But being an electrician or being a plumber or being an HVAC, I would suggest that anybody that's getting out of prison, they find their way into that field because that's where the money's at.
Yeah.
They're making more money, than lawyers, bro. It takes a minute to get there. But that's where the money's at for people like us,
Yeah, I agree. You said age of 13 cocaine. Was it always cocaine or did it just go like spiral into?
It was cocaine, marijuana until like the 90s, and then started doing meth. Then I started running the streets, and then I started using the gun, and it just got easier and worse and worse and worse. And then eventually, I ended up with a life sentence. I just couldn't stop using drugs.
How do you stay away from them now? Especially like going to the bachelor party and being like, how do you stay away from them now?
They're all over the place, dude. They're at work, they're smoking weed all day, but I know the consequences. I know if I use meth, I'm going to pick up a gun, and whatever happens along the way, I'm not going to care. And either I'm going to die or I'm going to end up in prison or I'm going to, you know what I mean? So I don't do it. I know the consequences. For me,
You don't even dabble it.
I know that, people, I've had people say like, oh, so, I go, look, man, if you know something's going to cause you problems and it's going to ruin your life, why are you going to do it? It's easy for me, but I lost my life. See, that's the difference. At one point in my life, I was never getting out of prison because of drugs.
Yeah.
So I literally lost my life. So the way I look at things is different from a person that never has. A person that's been in and out of prison 16 times for little crimes, they've never really have been just to the bottom to where it's just ruined. Your whole life's ruined. So for me, I know the consequences. I could be around meth, I could be around all that stuff. I'm not touching it. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying I hang around with dudes that do it, but I know that I'm not doing it because I know the consequences. My life is great right now. I like to, I work all week. I go to church on Sundays. I just have a great life, dude. Why would I want to ruin that and start using drugs, which are, or will just ruin my life? Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense. And I think it's so great that you put it out there because it's just the way that you said it was just so honest and true. I think sometimes guys that have had, addictions in the past, they start to come up with like all sorts of phrases and ideas and like, go left when you can go right. But like at the end of the day, what you've said to me is like, I just made a choice because this is who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. If you use meth, that you're going to pick up a gun and you're going to hurt somebody or you're going to get hurt, and definitely you're going to end up in prison for a life with a life sentence. In my shoes, it would be over because I just go nuts. You know what I mean? Why would I do that? You know what I mean? Why would I fucking risk all that? Why? That'd be stupid. And I know it's a lie. I remember I did a thing on TikTok, and one of my old friends I used to ran the streets with, this girl. She goes, "Oh, Chris, you know how it is with addiction though, and this and that." I'm like, "Yeah, but you've never lost everything like I've had." And I get that. I'm saying for me, this is for me, I know the consequences. I know what will happen if I use meth. I will end up in prison. And whatever happens along the way, I won't even care. Until I get there and sober up, then I'll be like, but why would I do? I'm not doing it.
No, it's not worth it. I
No.
love it. I love it. What's the story of the at-risk youth program?
Okay, so me and my buddy Ronnie Harrell, he wrote a book called The Encyclopedia of Self-Help. He did a lot of time in prison too. He just got out like 8 months ago. We have a nonprofit called www.star2023.org. Okay, so his prisons are going into the state of California, I think Tehachapi first. His book is the Encyclopedia of Self-Help. It's a bunch of self-help programs inside of one book.
Okay.
My part is for at-risk youth. So I wrote a book called Orange County: The Dark Side. This is it right here. It's about my life. It's an all true story, and it takes you from the beginning to the end of where I am now in life, which is, blessed and having a great life. My part's geared towards at-risk youth. So my goal in 5 years is to have a couple of vocations opened up in Orange County or anywhere in California, to where kids who are getting out of school for free can go to school to be electricians. Kids that drop out of school, any at-risk youth that wants to go, that's fully paid for because it's expensive. You know what I'm saying? So that's my goal. I go to schools as much as I can, and I talk to kids and I kind of tell my story. I go to sober living homes, do panels, whatever, to tell my story, to let people know that, hey, there's hope. But that's what that is. So, you can go to www.star2023.org, and, any donations that $1, $5, $10 helps. We've had it for about a year now. So that's what that's about, and then once you get on that website, it will take you through and explain everything to you, but yeah.
What do you find when you go and talk to these kids? You were on the streets at a much different age. And, sometimes when I talk to these kids, I don't understand half of the things that they're going through or they're experiencing. What are you finding out there? What are these kids dealing with in today's world? It's just debilitating.
I would say that social media is a big problem. And of course, fentanyl. It's a lot different now than when we were kids. I'm 53. So I know that, we dealt with meth in our days, a little heroin, but it wasn't killing people like the fentanyl is. But I think the kids now are babied too much by their parents, by society. And I think that that's a problem. I think that, you know, our generation, which I guess would be Gen X, was brought up a lot differently. And I think that these kids um, are being babied. That's just my opinion. You know, they're being babied. Um, and a lot of them are dying because of fentanyl and drugs. And I think that another thing that bothers me when I speak about at-risk youth, I think every kid in America is at-risk youth, and I'll tell you why. Because when I was growing up, before my parents got divorced, my mom was at home and my dad worked. They were able to support a family like that.
Yep.
Now that's impossible for a father to work and support a family. So you got your mom and your dad at work, and you got the kids running the streets all day till they come home. They have no guidance. They have they're being babied about life. And I think that's a problem, you know. And then you have, you know, how many ever single parent family homes? I think it's like 95% of the people in prison are from single parent family homes, which is,
Yeah,
it's pretty crazy if you think about it, you know?
you're right. And there's statistics out there that show if, you come from a father that went to prison, you're like 7 times more likely yourself to go to prison.
Yeah, of course. And you know, there's no way these kids you know, I remember the last school I went to was in Laguna Niguel, and I was actually surprised by, you know, what these kids told me afterwards. You know, some of the kids, they were in there kind of laughing or whatever, but some kids were really they really paid attention, and I think they really understood, you know. And I think it all comes down to parenting at this point, on how these kids and their friends. So I'll give you an example. You could be in a great family, you know, like the kids that I hung out with growing up in the city of Orange. Um, they were hanging around me. My dad was selling drugs. We were at my house doing drugs. You know, their parents didn't know that, but me being their friend and them hanging around with me, they were, you know, I was essentially ruining their lives just because I was their friend because of my dad. And that can happen anywhere. So if you're not home with your parents, if you're not home, if you're a parent and you're not at home with your kids all the time or watching them, they could easily become a statistic, you know, either be a drug addict, gang member, or die, you know. And I think that there's really no other way to say it, you know.
Yeah, you're spot on. You're spot on with that. What's your plan for the future? You've got obviously a good career, good head on your shoulders. You found a girl who you want to spend your life with. What's your plan for the future? Where's your vision board go to, brother?
Um, well, for the next 2 months is finished paying for this wedding. It seems like more and more every day it's more money, you know, but I want to buy a house in a year, dude.
Okay.
I really want to buy a house so I could leave it to my daughter. That's my goal. That's my vision. I'm 53. Um, my knees are messed up from doing burpees and playing basketball and handball, and you know what I'm talking about. Like, so I'm just
Oh, yeah.
trying. I'm just trying to. I could still work, but I'm going to end up having to have some knee replacements. But my goal is to run jobs, make more money, buy a house, and just enjoy what life I have left, what God has given me, you know, what's blessed me with.
Yeah.
You know, I've never in my life been in a relationship that didn't involve drugs. And the relationship I'm in now is the first real relationship I've ever been in, was with a woman. And she's my best friend. Like there's no I could just be with her 24/7. You know, like she knows everything about me. Um and there's no it's just it's hard to explain, man. And I would suggest for anybody getting out of prison once they do to find somebody that's going to that's not only going to love you, but it's going to push you. You know, like I've never felt, I've never in my life had somebody that cared about me except my mom. You know what I'm saying? Like, she cared about me so much to where, you know, I feel safe. And I don't know, it's hard to explain. But I don't know if you're in a relationship right now, but
16 years with the same girl. We've got
yeah,
four
you
little
know
four
you
four
know what I'm
kids.
talking about. You know what I'm talking about.
It's a beautiful thing, man. It's something that I wish everybody could experience. You know, because I think what you're saying is it's one of the things that's lacking from society with this throwaway generation. Everybody can just date and you know and have sex and move on. If they don't like one another, they just ghost each other or block them.
yeah,
And it's so vapid, it's so void. When you're with somebody who knows everything about you, good and bad and ugly and right and wrong, there's something so incredible about being able to explain yourself to them, some of the parts that you don't even know you've experienced, some of
yeah,
the things that you've never had happen to you before. I mean, there's just something that's so fantastic about growing with somebody that I hope everybody gets the chance to experience.
yeah. That's great, dude. Yeah, and I just want to help people
Yeah.
and just move forward, man. And you know, enjoy what life I have left because 26 years of it was in prison, literally. And that's a long time, you know. And I'll
Long.
say this though, too, though. Prison saved my life, dude. And it took a long time for me to change in prison too, but you know, it sucks that it took that much to make me see the light, but here I am today and I'm very happy. I'm blessed. And I just hope that, you know, people listening to this that are in prison will understand that, you know, you don't have to live in prison, dude. You know, you don't have to wake up every day, go to chow, come back, watch TV, and listen to all these dudes talk about nonsense, which has nothing to do with life and reality. You know, it has nothing to do. All the stuff that people talk about in there, or people, you know, trip about or whatever, it's just nonsense, man. It's nonsense, bro, and that's not life. You know, there's a life out here, you know, and it could be a really good life, man. You just got to work at it.
You're living proof, bro. We appreciate you.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you having me on here.
No, it'll be good. Let's catch up after your wedding and let's show everybody where you're at in a year from now. We'll do a tour from your crib.
Okay. Okay. Can I say one more thing?
Please, man, the floor is yours. Go.
Okay. So my book is available on Amazon.
Yes.
You know, if you want to buy it, a percentage of the book's going to at-risk youth. Also, you know, if you want to, you know, donate to www.star2023.org, even if it's $1, whatever you can afford, we would highly appreciate that. You know, if we're trying to save lives, you know, every person that we help that doesn't reoffend, that's one less victim in this world. And that's a big thing if you think about it.
Huge. It's
Yeah.
huge. With the Star 2023, where are you guys going into schools? You guys going into public housing?
Well,
Where are you
he's
going?
going. I'm going into schools.
Okay.
He's going into the CDCR. So
Wow.
he's already got his books going into Tehachapi.
Okay.
So it's just the beginning right now. You know,
Yeah.
we're just getting everything, you know. Like next week I'm gonna take probably like 100 books and have them dropped off at schools with my business card.
Good.
And if they want me to come speak, they just gotta contact me, you know.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it, bro. Well done. Man, you're living proof that you can do anything you set your mind to.
Yes, sir. Yep.
I love it, brother.
All
Okay.
right.
Keep inspiring the world, bro. Thanks.
Yep.